Well, we're here today to talk to you about your new book, and you were telling a little about yourself. And at some point, I heard you say you had been. Did you say a volunteer fire?
Yeah, we were recruited into the volunteer department near where we lived in Kansas, and I say we because a lot of what I did with my husband. But yeah, we were on a volunteer department. I am firefighter certified in Firefighter 1, and the department also asked me to become EMT certified, which I did do, and got that's through the state. You have to go through the state and take a test and everything, and I did that as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, we are excited to learn a little bit more about you and have you talk to us about our book. And we had some questions for you about the book that you wrote. And so if you're not familiar with the book that she wrote, it is, I'm afraid it's going to be backwards on the camera, but it looks like this.
It's in Hebrew.
Homestead Hints, and by Sister Kate Fox. And so we encourage you to go out and read the book. You know, this is what I had written down here was it's from A to Z, from advice from buying land, livestock, to livestock dogs, gardening, cooking, foraging, tools, milking, vehicles. Pretty much covers everything you could possibly ever want to know.
Yeah, one of the things that stood out to me was how it covered things I didn't even think about as pertains to homesteading. So
the book itself, I've said this on one of the other podcasts that I did. There was in the 1840s these guidebooks for people going out to Oregon, and to get on the Oregon Trail and head out there. And the guidebooks sometimes would be written by people who interviewed other settlers on their way out, or fur trappers and things, but they were not always written by people who'd actually taken the trip themselves. And they would have little, bits of information, maps, and locations where water was, and here's a good hunting site, and here's some friendly natives, and so on. And I thought that's kind of what I wanted this to be for homesteading. Sort of a guidebook versus a comprehensive encyclopedia. Because there are already books like that, like Carla Emery's book of Encyclopedia of Country Living, just very, very comprehensive. But I wanted this to be more of a Cliff Notes type for homesteading.
That makes
a lot of sense. The idea that you're going to be putting a lot of money to establish a homestead, so you want to be debt-free.
Yeah, and I think debt-free is important to me anyway. I think especially those of us that are in the kingdom, I think the scriptures are clear that we should be as debt-free as possible, because when we are not debt-free, then the man, so to speak, kind of has something on us, and
right, exactly.
And we're not, it's hard to do. So one of the things that you talked about there in the getting out of debt, most of us have a debt story. Do you have a debt story where now did you struggle to get out of debt yourself? Was this a process, or was this easy for you?
Okay, so that's a really good question. No. I have to kind of reel back a little bit on that, because my husband was in the military and was a military officer his whole career. You are told way back at the beginning of it all that you are not allowed to bounce even one check. If you bounce one check, you end his career, and they will chapter him out of the military. And so we have never been one to take on more debt than we can handle. And so I was thinking more of just when people contact us about homesteading and trying to get out of the city and get their own land and so on, that they would mention they have some debt. And so our suggestion to them is, well, pay that off somehow. Just like if you follow Dave Ramsey and his teachings, If you have a lot of debt, you start with the littlest one first and you pay that off. And his example is, you deliver pizza on the side to work on your debt and get them slowly chipped away. And so that's kind of the context of my suggestion there.
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. So, and and we encourage anybody out there listening to, don't be discouraged. You can get out of debt. It's possible, and just like you said, it's how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time, and poquito, poquito. I mean, just a little bit at a time, that kind of concept, and you'll get it. Yeah, because if you tackle it all at once, it could be overwhelming, and you just throw your hands up and go, "I can't do this." But
Right.
we encourage you to try to do that. So now, something that's interesting to me: we raise sheep. We raise Dorper sheep here, and we mostly use them for meat, and we eat them, and so sheep. I grew up with cattle, and every cattleman I've ever known in my life would. In fact, my uncle said, "Matt, I don't know why you want sheep. They're just looking for a place to die." So, that is pretty much a common thing said with sheep. And explain some of the signs of distress that you talked about maybe with a goat or a sheep. What are some of the, because that's a good place for someone to start because they're fairly cheap to get into. They don't eat as much as a cow. I highly recommend you look at sheep and chickens, and maybe don't go straight to a cow because cows can be real expensive. But tell us about distress in an animal like that.
Okay, so for me, we just got our first sheep. Pastor has a small sheep flock, and they are also a neat sheep. So thus far, they seem to be doing okay. The thing about my goats is I've had goats a long time. I've had goats approximately 20 years. And what I would notice in the goat is, especially near their hips, right in front of their hips where all four stomachs are located, if they have worms, their sides will be sunken in versus blowing out. And then they will lose energy. They will get really, really focused on grain and feed, especially sweet feed, like my goats when they were, because worms are one of the biggest problems with ruminants. Whenever they were having problems, they'd be yelling at me whenever they saw me in the yard, like, you need to bring more feed. And what you can look for is white in their eyes, like around their eyes, paleness, and in their gums. Their gums, when most goats are healthy, are pink or even to red, but they will be white when the worm problem is too much, when it's an overload. And so I learned pretty quickly the difference between having a vet give you Panicure for your goat and the tube of horsewormer that says Panicure on it is simply, it's the same medicine. Mm-hmm. It may be a different dose, but Panicure is Panicure is Panicure. And so I started to use horsewormer and just dial it down to their weight and just stick it on their gum versus getting the powder from the vet and so on. And I'm not saying I'm a vet. Yeah. I'm not saying, that this is medical advice I'm giving you. I'm just telling you how I dealt with things like that.
So you don't use a plunger and inject it straight into their throat. You just put it on their gum. Because we just did that this Saturday. We had about maybe 20 or 30 mamas that we wormed and ran through, and we trimmed. Do you trim hooves?
I did the hoof trimming. I sure did for the goats. I got the trimmers, which is, it was part of teaching my goats how to get milked. Mm-hmm. Would be in the stand, and then while you're in the stand, you may get milked, but I may look at your ears, look at your eyes. I may pick your feet up. I may trim your feet. You may get a shot. Mm-hmm. If you have to give them an antibiotic. Just all those kind of things rolled into one.
Yeah.
If you've got to do 20 of them, I'm sure you have some way to contain each sheep and then do the worming and all that.
Yeah. No, that's good. I think Jake had a few questions.
Yeah, I saw a video you did recently about, actually, I don't know if the video was recent, but I watched it recently, but about feeding acorns to your chickens and ducks and stuff like that. And I just wanted to know if that's worked out well for you. You still do that? Do you have to boil out the tannins if you're feeding them to chickens? That kind of thing.
I have only watched. I saw my ducks just eat them flat out. The year we had the drought, which was not this year but last year, the acorns in the area were really small, and the ducks would just eat it whole. I've also seen the goats do the same thing. The acorns that were on the ground, the goats just bit and chewed up and ate. No problem with the tannin. For humans, obviously, you have to do the thing for the tannin.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, the video I watched, a young lady did about a 15-minute video where she recommended you dehydrate the acorns first, to like dry them out,
Okay.
to kind of to store them, and you roast them. And I've got some now. I started the process, and they're roasted in a jar. And then when I want to use them, to do the hot water rinsing. And I think for chickens, you would definitely have to crack the shell at the very least, and offer them the meat. Chickens should be able to just eat that.
Okay.
They eat anything. Chickens,
That's true.
mice, frogs, hot dogs, leftover pizza. Like, they eat literally anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, something that I related to you, I started my first garden when I was about 7 years old, and so I read that in your book as well. And there was something you wrote about, and that was this Egyptian onion. And I want to know more about that. I've never heard of such a thing, and I just I'm curious.
Man, I wish I'd known that, because I could have brought you the heads of it. Okay, so the walking onion, or the Egyptian onion, I was given the plant by a friend, and that was 20 years ago. I still have some in the garden now. They are a smaller onion. It's a red onion, and they grow a stalk, and it gets about 10 inches tall, and it looks like green onion, like what you buy in the store, but then it forms small onions on top. And I really think that might be where pearl onions come from. When you buy those pickled pearl onions, are really small. The onion on top of that stalk is small, and then the whole thing, when they get big enough, and it's no bigger than about a quarter, the whole stalk falls to the ground, and those little ones root themselves, and then they all start to grow stalks, and then they grow more heads, and they fall. And so once you've planted them, you literally, and I'm sorry, this looks weird. I've got mosquitoes flying around my face.
No problem.
Sorry. That you literally do not have to ever plant another onion.
Wow.
So I've got a 4 foot wide, 4 foot long square of onions, and I have given many of those away, and I've planted some out on our property, which is basically rocks and trees. Like, there's very little soil here unless you make the soil. And these onions don't care. And you can mow them down, and they don't care.
So what do they do in summer heat? So, where we live, we get 100 plus. And typically onions for me, by the end of May, I can't grow an onion anymore. They're going to bolt, and they go to seed. So how do they do in heat?
They were there in the drought last year. It was, like 3 months here, no rain, and temperatures in the 90s, and they just carry on. I don't know how else to.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
They do their thing. I've also kept those little heads. They do have a skin on them.
Mm-hmm.
I've had them in a Ziploc gallon-sized bag for years, like 3 years, tucked away somewhere. Found them, pulled them out, gave them to somebody. Those people planted them, and they grew. Like, these things are amazing.
Wow, that's a great secret, because I do this year. I probably put out 250 onion slips or something like that, and
Wow.
I had a gopher just about wipe me out. So I'd pick up. What happened is these onions got about 2 feet tall. I'd go out in the garden, and I'd see an onion kind of leaning a little, and then next thing you know, it's like halfway down a hole, and then I come back a little later, and there's just a little piece sticking up, and then sometimes I'll pull it up, and you can see where it got nibbled on, and it's aggravating. So, but I'd like to. That probably won't help me with a gopher situation, but I want to try those.
Well, if you send me your address in an email, I will put some of the heads in the bag, and then you can go ahead and try it down there however you want. You could put them in a container. They'd probably do fine there for a while.
Yeah.
And grow you some more heads, and then you could try sticking them in your bed or whatever.
Yeah, walk it to the next container.
yeah, that's great.
Right.
And so that's an Egyptian or a walking... Yeah.
Yeah, walking onion or Egyptian onion is the name.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, and then I noticed on page like 39 and 40 in your book, you have a calendar in there, and so I encourage anyone that doesn't have this book, you need to go out and get it. And, the calendar that's in there is a great way to kind of keep up with tasks that need to be done on the homestead. Oh, she's showing it to you right there.
Oh, yep.
Yeah.
I like how you have like a weekly, daily breakdown, and daily working with children. I like that. I have small children, so. But yeah, it's a good breakdown, and then you got the calendar year notes, which is good.
Yeah, the calendar is a combination of personal experience, and then there's a book, and I thought I mentioned it in here, on England about the year 1000, and they had a yearly round, as it's called. My son took an agricultural class in college, and his instructor had told them like the daily round, the weekly round, the monthly round, and then the yearly round. And how in an agricultural life, there's going to be a lambing season, there's going to be a gardening season, there's going to be, and I'm really big into this year, the pruning your grapes in February, pruning your fruit trees in February. And so the calendar there is a conglomeration of my experience and that. And there's also a Hebrew calendar like that, which you put into Google like ancient year calendar. I forget the name of it, but there was one for that too. Obviously, it would have been in the Mediterranean versus a European country, but it's the same sort of thought process. You make your wine at a certain time, you go find honey, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I think Jake had a few
I
more
had a
questions,
couple questions also. Another one is, so do you do meat chickens or just layers?
Okay, so that's a really good question as well. I'm not done the meat chickens. I'm familiar with the idea, and I have friends who do it. But when I've seen the amount of work that goes into some of them, where you have to like change the bedding very often, and they can't walk real well, and so on, near the end as they keep getting heavier, I'm a tender-hearted woman. I don't really like butchering if I can help it.
Right.
And right now it's easy for us, with just two of us. I'm not feeding a family of 7. I'm feeding 2 adults who don't necessarily need a lot of extra calories. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're trying to be smart in our food decision making. I've only ever kept layers, and I've had laying hens, oh my gosh, a really long time. As a matter of fact, one of the stories I've been able to tell in relation to chickens is we were in a third world country. We were in a capital city, and it was in the middle of jungle. And I was homeschooling. My husband was doing some military stuff, and I was like, you know what, doggone it, I want to have some chicken. And so I went scavenging in construction sites around this major city, because in a third world, like, it's no OSHA, so there'd be mounds of stuff, right? And so I picked up some screening and some tin roof, like a tin roof panel, some 2x4s, ends and pieces and so on, and I built myself my first coop, which was for 2 chickens, just
Nice.
2, really small. And then I went to a local equivalent of a Stop and Shop gas station, went in there, bought some ice cream and some comic books for the kids, and said, I would like 2 chickens as well. And they just looked at me and said, you sure you want 2 chickens? And I'm like, yeah, laying eggs. And they got on a scooter, rode out into their village, and came back with 2 chickens that they had tied up in those Walmart kind of bags and just handed them to me. And that cost me about 50 cents a bird. And those are the 2 chickens I started with in that little teeny coop. So, yeah, I really like them as a homesteading starter animal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
And then the BBC shows, the Edwardian Farm, Victorian Farm, Wartime Farm. So my family and I, we've watched those ones, and we really like them.
They're amazing.
Yeah, and lots of good advice in there. The one that I haven't seen, though, is the Elizabethan Farm.
I think they did one, because the thing that, the memory I have of watching the Elizabethan Farm, maybe they called it something else.
Okay.
Was, I'm pretty sure it was Elizabethan, for the air conditioning in the kitchen that they showed, and it was a the tile floor with the fire pit in the middle in a big building like a home. And in the summer, to make it cooler in there, they would just wet those tiles.
Okay.
And then the tiles would evaporate, the water would evaporate off, and it would lower the temperature in the kitchen because you're cooking over a fire pit as well, so it's going to be hot.
I think, is this the one where they build the castle?
I don't remember. It's been a while since I watched them, but maybe it is the same one.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering if so that's a good pickup from those shows. If there was any other things in there that you thought were just, oh, that's really neat, really interesting, really useful. Any of those kind of tips?
Yeah, there was one of that astounded me. It astounded me. One of those shows showed people would get salmon eggs and then put them in little glass tubes in some kind of box in a stream bed and hatch out the little baby salmon in there and then be able to transfer them, to make them in a pond or something bigger and older. And I was like, no way. There's no way I would have thought to put these little, eggs in a glass tube in a stream, like a running stream. I was just like, okay, I'm not worthy.
Yeah,
I'm not worthy.
It was pretty, I remember that one. It was
right?
Pretty amazing. Yeah, some of the stuff they do on there. One of the things that always sticks with me is I think it's that same one you're talking about where they had the fire in the middle of the hut, and she went out and got like clay out of the road, and she'd make a pot with it, and that's where you get potholes, is because they go find the good spots in the trails and pull out a bunch of clay and make their pots with them, and then people would like wreck their carriages.
Oh, it's a pothole. Right. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that's really good too.
Yeah. But we really like those shows. So people listening, check those out. They're very, very good shows.
Yeah, very informative. How many, I remember another one where they were trying to figure out how many acres of grain they needed to plant for so many bushels at the end of the season in order to be able to, have enough food for the next year. And they had to get local farmers with the horse team to go out and plow the field because there was no way you were going to be able to plow it by hand. Like, it was just way too hard. Just really in-depth thought to how they were going to survive.
Yeah,
really.
And it gives a good sense of community that I think they call it frass, that holds the community together, reaching out to your neighbors, so when stuff does go down that you have some resources that you can share and that kind of thing.
Right, yeah. Manpower is needed. Joint manpower is needed in an agricultural world.
Oh yeah, yeah, and our forefathers, grandparents, they knew that, and so I do have to tell you about my grandfather. He wrote this book. It didn't really get published too widely. I don't even think it has an ISBN number, but he wrote this. It's some things I've heard and some things I've seen, and one of the things that he wrote in here, I don't know if you can see this, but he wrote up a recipe of how to make sorghum molasses.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And
that's
so
awesome.
so he felt like there was going to be a day and time when we would need to know how to do some of these things. And sorghum molasses is one of those things I tell people here all the time. I was like, if if push comes to shove and I'm surviving, there are a couple of things I'm going to do. I'm going to grow a lot of okra because that's easy, prolific. I'm going to grow a lot of I'm going to grow squash, and I'm going to grow like a sorghum. And you can survive on those three things if you couldn't grow anything else, because here in Texas, those things grow prolifically.
Yeah. Yeah, even a couple of years ago with the drought, we had some sorghum planted on our property, and it was like the only thing that survived, and it did really well.
Wow. I did. A friend of mine applied to do a master's craft class with the local university. And her family has been in the area for a long time. And she wanted to show how to grow it and then harvest it and turn it into the dough. And so I did that with her, and she bought her grinder off of Amazon. It was a small grinder you could put on a table. And anyway, it came through, and then she cooked that stuff up and gave us a sample of the sorghum. And I always thought that super, it's amazing the flavor, which it's hard to even describe the depth of taste in that stuff. Well, this year, just like the past 11 years has been on our property, the father showed us wild edibles. Like each year, something new discovered. One year it was passion fruit, later like eating. And I didn't know anything about it, so that was a really cool thing. This past year, it was maple trees. We do have maple trees on our land. And someone else had shown us in the past, hey, you can have those. And she had done that. We made syrup. We had not done it ourselves. So this past year, as the time came around, I could feel it in my bones. Like, you need to go tap your trees now. And so we only tapped 5, and we made syrup, and it is so good. If you're willing to sit there for that, 12 hours of a day, when you're cooking it off, and it's concentrating and the water's boiling off and everything, it is so worth it. It is absolutely delicious. So I'm on board with you in the sorghum. I really am. I think it's amazing. And she also took, I think, the seed heads off and would fry them and eat them, even, I think.
Yeah.
From the sorghum top.
Yeah, my other grandfather had a Poppin' Johnny. He actually had like 3 Poppin' Johnnies with open flywheels. And he had a grinder, a big tub grinder that he ran, and he had a big belt, that he ran off, and he ground his own feed, and he did everything like that, and he mixed in his own molasses to it. And so there's a lot of those things that people know, and that knowledge is in your family. And so I would encourage you, if you're looking to get into homesteading, first you need to get Homestead Hints. You need to get that book in your library, and then also talk to older people in your life. Before, unfortunately, our older people they're going fast, and so you need to do that. You need to maybe interview them, have some conversations, maybe just use your mic on your phone and record what they have to say, and maybe get them to tell you some of those things, because if we don't capture there's a lot of old information that it's going to get lost with the generations in front of us if we don't try to capture some of those things. And you might be surprised what some older folks in your life might know if you ask them a few things.
Absolutely. And the Foxfire book series is kind of like that too. It was the 70s, I think, when high school students in West Virginia went out and asked their elders, what sort of things, how did you butcher a pig, how did you set up a log cabin? And those books, the same thing. Just you need to get that information now from people who've done it.
Yeah.
No, that's good. Well, so how do we tell people where and how do they find you, your book? What do they need to do next?
Okay, you can find me at Sister Kate Shofar Mountain on YouTube. I'm also Sister Kate Shofar Mountain on Instagram, and you can just, type it in there and watch the videos, comment, etc. Homestead Hints is a better deal right now on Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble has it for the price that me and my publisher set it for, and they charge no shipping. So it's a really good deal. It's $13, and so they're doing great with it right now. It's listed on Amazon, but Amazon is still, I think they allow for 6 weeks once it's printed to actually get it there in the form that I sent it. I don't know how else to explain that. It takes a while. So I'm still waiting. I go and check Amazon every day to see what the price is at, because right now it's someone else who has gotten a copy and is selling it for more than what I set the price for.
Right.
And is charging shipping. So
yeah,
it's up to you, but I would go to Barnes & Noble. And Debarim Publishing also, who you did a podcast with Sarah, right? Sarah Williams?
Yeah.
Yeah, she still, if you want to, you can order through her, and she will ship it out as well. I don't know how long that she's going to continue doing that, but I know this week she sent out 5 more, so she's still doing it, as far as I know.
Great. Well, and and I wanted to talk about Debarim Publishing a little bit, and you and I both work with her a little bit, and so. I highly recommend, if you have a book, if you have a story, if you have something you want to try to get out, contact Debarim Publishing. Sarah is great. She's really good at editing, and she's helped Kate and I both. And we just want you to go check out Debarim Publishing and look at all the other works that she has available online, and the authors. And she's always looking for people with new ideas. And speaking of new ideas, do you see other books? Do you have other things you're working on? Is this the first of many, or what do you think?
I definitely have other ideas. I was a literature major in college, and so I've always wanted to write the great American novel. But I also felt, until I was about as old as I am now, that I didn't have enough experience to be truthful in the novel. Like, I hadn't been married yet. I hadn't had a child yet. Hadn't really moved a lot. And so now I've got all those experiences, and now I don't want to write the great American novel. What I'm trying to work on, and it's part of my YouTube channel perks for channel members, is a book that's biblically based with biblical kind of living and characters. Sort of, I guess you would call it a historical adventure, maybe, with real facts, but obviously not based on real people. And so that's in the pipeline. And it just surprised me that my first book is nonfiction. I just never saw myself doing a nonfiction book. But I look forward to working with Sarah in the future. And another book I'd really like to try to write with her is the history of the Torah observant movement in the U.S. Because we were a pastoral couple of a Christian non-denominational church for 7 years before we came to Torah. And I'm not saying we're the only ones who have this experience. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the country, in our religious world. But we've seen now a good 18 years of faith-based belief in our part of the world, our part of the country. And I think there's some historical things happening. I really do.
Yeah, well, I do think that'd be a great book to write, because, definitely the things we've seen prophesied of Ephraim, awakening and coming back. Rob Skiba talked about that a lot, and I feel like that's us. We are awakening and finding out who our real identity is, and more and more people are waking up to to these things, and so that would be a great book for you to write.
At least my perspective of it. I'm no authoritarian no specialist. I have no idea what the movement's doing in California,
Right.
but I know what the movement did that we saw with our own eyes and experienced ourselves. And so that's kind of in the back too, floating around.
Yeah. You know, and something, I don't know if you're familiar with Parable of the Vineyard and Adam Fink. I've seen him kind of kick the tires on before about revival. And, you know, I came from Church of Christ tradition. I was a youth minister. I was a deacon. I did all the things. And for a long time, and helped plant a church myself, and, you know, did all those things and walked away from it all. But I always hoped there'd be revival, and I always heard people talk about revival, and now this is revival. This is what it looks like. This is it.
Right.
The thing that I always wanted to see happening. It is happening, and you know, it's an awesome thing to be a part of, and especially when you realize this is true revival.
Absolutely. And the thing I think is really interesting, I've done a few videos on it, is almost 100 years since the last great revival in the U.S., or actually 200, because 1820 was a huge revival, and the Mormon Church came out of that. And I'm not saying the Mormon Church is right, but I'm saying there were, you know, huge crowds of people that would go into fields, and a pastor would come riding through on a mule or whatever and would speak to thousands of people about Jesus. And then in the 1920s, around that time frame, is when the Pentecostal church actually was born in America, and it started in California. And so that was 100 years, and now we're in 100 years later, and we've got this Torah observant movement. And I agree, it's a kind of revival. And not only that, with the Holy Spirit, and in Kentucky with those young people at the colleges and so on getting fired up, I think it's probably a direct result, or a direct, not opposition, but you've got a rise of the secular world at the same time of a rise of the Holy Spirit. And so I think there's something going on there. I do. And it is revival. It is so exciting when you find out the Bible has even that much more meaning.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're born again, it's so exciting, and you're on fire and everything. And then to find out the Word is even that much deeper, I think is that much more exciting.
Yeah, and the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know anything. And, so, well, it's been great talking to you, and we kind of got started off sluggish. You know, Jake and I usually just do audio podcast, but tonight we were like, well, let's try the video thing, and so we got some of it done, I guess, but it took a minute to get there. We appreciate you being patient, Sister Kate, and appreciate your technical know-how to do that. I don't, like I said, I don't think we have enough followers to do the thing where we do a joint live stream.
Yeah, where you were hosting the live stream. That may be true.
Right. Yeah,
but I enjoyed it. And maybe what we can do is give it a little while, and then I will invite you guys to do a live stream with me again.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. And so what I'll do is I've got a good audio of this recording off. I think I saw somebody ask how can they get the audio, and so I will put this out on Sabbath Lounge. We have a podcast, and I think I can make it available typically in YouTube, a version that's just audio. So it'll be out there and soon, and so you can find us. And once again, if you don't have Homestead Hints by Sister Fox, you need to go get it, and we can't recommend it enough. And we appreciate your time on this evening, and being gracious and kind, and we ask that the Lord will continue to bless you and honor you and your commitments to trying to get back to his ways. Jake, you got anything else?
Thank you.
No, just really enjoyed the conversation, and if you could maybe let your side of the fence know that we'll be posting the audio with this, then it'll hopefully all work out together. So
absolutely. I will put links and so on, and I may even just go live after this real quick to explain to everybody what happened, and it's all good.
That sounds good.
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming on with us, and have a great evening.
All right.
Yeah, you too. Bless y'all.
All right. Bless you too.
Bless you.
Bye.